Day 380 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, we'll start off with taking a quick look at those Russian military losses, where Russia is currently sitting on 156,990 military personnel losses. Then when we take a quick look at the hardware, so 7 tanks, 6 APVs, 10 artillery, but also 3 multiple launch rocket systems and 1 aircraft. And on top of that, 2 Russian air defense systems, which I've got the footage for right here, although I'm not yet privy to the location of these yet. So the first one was a Tor M2 and the second one was an S300, the VM variant launcher there, both taken out, sighted and marked for termination. And such an incredible loss for Russia, really, that I doubt even gets communicated back up the Russian chain of command, to be honest. Because if the commander reports it, the commander gets canned or demoted. And that would be the best case scenario. In fact, Russia even has a term for this. It's called razriv srazpizyu, also known as breaking the contract. And I've spoken about things relating to this a bit before because the uninformed and systematically flawed military structure that Russia is stuck with inevitably leads to a much less informed level of awareness about the actual battle space itself, which often leads to poor military choices. Then we'll move back across to the map and we'll start out in Russia, in fact, way further on the other side than I can probably even show you on this map, where overnight, all the way in Vladivostok, here it is, made it all the way there, which is just a few hundred miles at most from Japan, really. So we had some Russian partisans who decided to light up a Russian Su-27 fighter jet, which is really unfortunate for Russia, who live in a world now where they can't surely keep losing jets as they are. And you know what? These are the exact types of jets that are no stranger to testing the Alaskan airspace every 9 months or so. So Russia might start having more of a limited capability to be acting like a bully to Alaska now. So that's a nice added benefit too. Then we'll reset the map and take a quick peek at the Belgorod Oblast of Russia. And this is how the security line in Belgorod of Russia looks like right now. And this is always a bit of a confusing reality that I see here, a bit of unusual Russian logic, really. So the Russian invading force has switched gears in this location and many others to make defensive lines at the internationally recognized and accepted borders. Then moving across on the map, still outside of Ukraine today, so the Ukrainian military intelligence warns of possible provocations prepared by Russia on the border between Belarus and Ukraine now. And it's never out of the question that it could happen. It could be some sort of a fake occurrence, also known as a false flag attack, something to push Belarus to actively get really involved in the war. Unlikely still. Oh, and since we're here at Belarus, I'll mention Uncle Luka. So, the Belarusian president Lukashenko signed a law on the execution of officials for treason. So, a higher measure of punishment will be applied to civil servants and those enlisted in the military personnel who have committed treason. And this is basically a very similar law to the one that Georgia just yesterday all rallied up against the implementation of. Now, Georgian citizens stopped that one from going through, but no one could stop Uncle Luka from putting this bill through. Then we'll move now into Ukraine, and we'll take a look in the Donbass. We'll start out in Bakhmut today. It's not something I do every day, but still an ongoing front line here, as you can see, where Russia still hasn't encircled Bakhmut, but the situation there certainly remains very difficult. The Ukrainian commander in the region just said that right now every decision is of vital importance, and it is an extremely fluid situation on the front lines. There are a lot of international politicians, if you will, the heads of NATO, for instance, are saying that Bakhmut is likely to be taken, perhaps set in expectations. We still don't know that for sure, but it's still a good chance that it will be taken by Russia. Which actually leads me to get a little bit philosophical for a moment about Bakhmut. So, if or when Prigozhin's Wagner forces take Bakhmut, it will then become a real moment of introspection for Russia, all Russians in general, to reflect on the countless months and the massive loss of life needed to take a single town. Except right now, Russia is instead thinking in terms of squeezing out any last bits of land to take the remainder of Bakhmut. So it's only after that moment they will realize that one town in 8 months, with an incredible loss of resources of all types, is not ideal, as they stand right in the face of 50 more Bakhmuts right out there. And I think it will be a real sobering moment for Russians from all walks of life in Russia. Then, somewhere in the east, in the Donbass, check out these trick shots. So here we have an AFU drone or operators that found a tank called Barkus, apparently, or evidently, and destroyed it. And just so you know, this is an empty tank, but in the footage just prior to this, the Russian tankers exited the tank because they were getting harassed non-stop by a couple of Ukrainian drones. And as a result, the Russians became, sufficiently frightened enough to abandon ship. Then we'll move across to Kherson, and somewhere in Kherson that we haven't spoken about recently. So the Kinburn Spit. You might remember that one there, a bit of a peninsula, a little small peninsula of sorts. So a Ukrainian artillery unit destroyed a Russian Mr. S, so a self-propelled howitzer. Big old gun on wheels, a Russian one on the Kinburn Spit. Although no photo for that one, sadly. Almost always have got a photo. Then we'll move down to the Russian-occupied Crimean Peninsula. So the head of the occupied peninsula and the current puppet government admitted that Russia is building fortifications for defense against the armed forces of Ukraine. And of course, we already know this. We've seen footage of 200 kilometers of beach defensive lines there. For what exact reason? Not exactly quite sure still. There won't be any amphibious assaults from Ukraine. They don't exactly even have a navy to speak of. And as for the Russian defenders, let's call them here, I mean, they can try, but I do believe that this internationally unrecognized government's days are numbered. Then we'll move across to some news for today. So, a bit of a tank update. So, the Polish defense minister announced that Poland has now delivered all 14 pledged Leopard tanks to Ukraine. And with Poland being Poland, it's likely the first of many they'll send as they look to transition some of their tank fleets to the M1 Abrams. Then in some other hardware-related news, these are the first photos of the Italian M109L self-propelled guns delivered from Italy to Ukraine that appeared today. Again, a big old gun on wheels. Also reportedly around 20 to 30 of the M109Ls were delivered to the Ukrainian military, which is interesting that we have this data because generally Italy itself is quite sparse on the details, quite private or secretive about what they actually provide to Ukraine so far. Now, these are actually not the newest or even the prettiest SPGs, but they do use the 155mm NATO standard shells. And you can even theoretically use the modern long range, or the more modern long range precision guided Excalibur munitions in these very puppies, provided that the SPG is equipped with the sufficient guidance systems on its internals. Then in some other news, so a red alert went out to several regions of Russia via broadcast TV and radio in a suspected cyber attack. The message was a fake that said a nuclear strike has been conducted. Please go to the shelter, take your calcium iodide pills. So, I don't mean to laugh at that. Now, it's hard to know exactly what to make of something like this, with which hackers or which partisans decided to, why they even decided to do this or for what purpose. And the TV graphics were actually a little bit too good, a little bit too Hollywood fake, the way they transitioned on the screen. It's an oddity. And Russians in Russia have been warned before of a fake impending nuclear strike via radio too. So it's happened before. It will probably happen again. I just hope in the next time that it happens, it'll be something a little bit untoward about Putin himself. So if you guys are watching, do that instead. And then in some other news, the US has put out an arrest warrant for a Boeing 737, so an actual plane, owned by Russia's Rosneft oil company, and allegedly also belongs to Igor Sechin, the owning oligarch there. Now, the plane is worth about 25 million US dollars, and the Russian aircraft industry, I've got to say, and just add in at this point, is largely running on fumes right now. Pun intended, probably true. So, due to sanctions, aircraft maintenance is a difficult task now in Russia because most Russian airliners use Boeing or Airbus planes or even some French ones, which are obviously not of Russian origin. And there's only about 9 or 10 companies in the world that are certified to produce specific spare parts for these aircraft. So after Russia cannibalizes their existing fleets, air travel in the largest or the world's largest country is not going to be without its limitations, severe limitations. Then in some other news, Poland has started installing anti-tank hedgehogs on the border with Belarus. And I say, good, do it. It's probably more symbolic than anything, but it will assist in increasingly isolating the pro-Russian country of Belarus, just as Russia itself is. Then moving across to another Russian military mobilization blunder. So here we have a commander of his platoon directly stating he is refusing to obey orders. Not really sugarcoating this one. So these men were transferred to the so-called DPR for meat assaults, quote unquote, they said, and lost a major part of their personnel due to a complete lack of training and reconnaissance. And this is their words, his words, not mine. It's really the same old story as you might, expect to see now. But the language this time, or in many recent times, is starting to become more and more unrestrained, bordering on mutiny, really. I mean, I guess it is. So good for them. I just made the suggestion for mutiny the other day. Then in a bit of a quick video funny to round it all off for today, guys. So this is how to catch a Russian soldier. Now, this is some next level trolling by the Ukrainian armed forces. I've not seen this footage before. I'm surprised, as it doesn't necessarily look recent. Well, region and weather dependent. Ukraine is a big place. But as you can see, we have a toilet jigged to a remote controlled mine, ready to pop off when someone takes a dump. I'm not normally that crude on this channel. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.